When Netflix announced they were making an edgy, live-action Winx Club reboot, I was cautiously optimistic. If you're like me, you watched the Winx Club cartoon a lot as a kid. It was on all the time on Sundays. I think 4Kids had it, and it was just sandwiched between episodes of Pokemon and Sonic X. But y'all, I was seriously excited for this. The live-action Winx was something that had languished in development hell for years, and suddenly I was getting a teaser trailer. Honestly, the thought of watching it got me through January. So for those fans, the 20-year-olds who still like to watch Winx, they will hopefully find their sweet spot in the Netflix original live-action. I'm a 20-something who still likes Winx. Is this for me? Then I saw it was 6 episodes. Huh. And I'm not sure who it was for. Winx Club is an Italian animated children's series following 6 fairies as they go to Alfea, where they learn about magic, save the world, and date cute boys. Not in that order exactly. If you're like me, you watched it either while it was airing on 4Kids or Nickelodeon, and it was amazing and you've never forgotten about it. It had fun characters who were so easy to like and latch onto. It had good villains, which were weirdly sexual, and I don't understand why that happened. Seriously, I can't be the only one who thinks that. This bothers me so much. My sister and I love this show so much we pre-gamed this by rewatching the first 3 seasons of the cartoon, and oh boy, it was not worth it. In just a few weeks, the adaptation got wicked popular. It beat out Bridgerton for Netflix's #1 watch show on the daily rankings for a bit, and I don't even know how that's possible. But wow, this adaptation is polarizing. Part of the problem with adapting something that's just so full of childhood nostalgia means that people want it to match up to what they remember as a child. The darker tone, the grittier aesthetic, and the whitewashing of 2 major characters definitely put a lot of pre-critiques out there. The thought process of this show was clearly, what if your childhood, but edgy? And I didn't have a problem with that at first. I figured I'd miss all of the colorful and bright aesthetics, but I was okay with seeing a new take on the universe. But no. My problems with Fate the Winx Saga are much more technical in scope. But first, we need to get some background. Let's talk about how we got here. Part 1, the pre-show critiques. A light, playful defense of what we got. I saw a lot of people reacting to the trailer like, oh god, is this gonna be another Riverdale? Is Netflix making CW trash out of my favorite cartoon? Why is Netflix trying to ruin my childhood? And I don't know how to break this to you, but Winx Club always had this sort of proto-CW, but for kids vibe to it. I mean, this is a show where teenage girls flirt with boys, learn magic, and save the universe from the forces of evil. CW doesn't equal bad, and they've been responsible for some of my favorite dramas over the years. With the lead writer coming from the Vampire Diaries, and with Netflix actually making some decent fantasy series lately, I wasn't put off by the shift in tone. But then I saw that first episode, and oof. And it bothered me so much I had to make a video about it. But in doing so, I'm going to limit the amount of references I make to the original cartoon. The art of adaptation means changing elements, even the ones I might have liked, in order to fit a different medium. And of course I look at the cartoon with these huge nostalgia lenses that I just don't have for this show. So I think it's in bad faith to criticize the adaptation for changing things from the original. But don't you worry, my loves. Fate the Winx Saga has plenty to complain about without even watching the original cartoon. If you don't like spoilers, you should probably click out of this video now. But if you do like spoilers, or if you've already watched it, let's get this started. Part 2. Oh damn, is it short? How is it this short? I can't express this enough, but Fate the Winx Saga is short. It's really short, alarmingly short. When I opened up my Netflix queue and I saw it was only 6 episodes, my heart sank. I was sort of expecting a chilling Adventures with Sabrina kind of situation where we get like 10 episodes and they're an hour long, but that didn't happen. The old cartoon was really great at these episodic things, these cute character moments, but yeah, 6 episodes? It's just not a lot of time. Here we're sprinting from plot point to plot point because we've got to wrap this shit up. Exposition is short, fast, confusing, and it's designed for maximum impact. When we do get exposition, it's from storytelling that's clumsy and unearned. For example, we learn that Bloom is a changeling, a fairy switched out with a human baby at birth for some reason. To cause trouble, I think. It's a discovery that's so anticlimactic it hurts.
You drew on a good deal of magic without even trying. It's hard to believe you're from a dormant bloodline. Is there any chance you're adopted?
No.
Oh god, you're a changeling.
There's no lead up to it, no foreshadowing whatsoever. There's no chance for the audience to even figure out that Bloom's origins might be kind of fishy. The plot just kind of tells us this so we can get going. This revelation is later confirmed by a flashback that just kind of happens. Bloom and Aisha go to their bedroom, and Bloom just has a flashback right out of nowhere, and all of a sudden she's recalling the events of her birth. It's kind of crazy. This is a flashback triggered by nothing. It just happens, and they have to react to it like it's normal. You get the impression that we're speeding through this laundry list of plot points instead of having characters react to things or discover things about themselves, because we gotta get this plot rolling. We need to move on. Fate the Winx Saga has some of the most ill-timed info dumps I've ever seen. The side effect to having such a short series is that there's not enough time to properly explain things. So the characters have to squeeze in all of this information at the strangest of times. Wouldn't we tell the audience that Musa is dating Tara's little brother? Yeah! Right as this guy here is literally dying.
Sam, go and get Dad. Dad, he's my brother.
Yes, we are somehow supposed to register both pieces of information as equally important. When should Bloom have this flashback about being switched at birth? Yeah, just do it now. We don't need to have explanations for why we do things. Just literally just mid-sentence, right now, prompted by nothing and not even during a dream. This is some of the most poorly timed info dumps I've ever seen. Oh my god. There's a lot of hinting at backstories for some of these characters, like Riven is always described as this former nerd, but now he's a stoner. It's kind of silly. They don't get around to properly explaining Sky's dad's deal until later. And finally, for the sake of exposition, the dialogue gets wonky as hell. Some of this doesn't make sense at all.
Shocker, Earth fairy called Terra likes plants.
Does he have any of Andreas' less ideal qualities? His bloodlust?
Break out the villain to get what Bloom wants, and then trap her again. Simple.
Pictures of my sad teenage years, not happy thoughts. Noted.
Bloom is a fish out of water protagonist. You can get away with explaining literally anything to her, and the show just goes out of its way to avoid doing this. The first 2 episodes were absurdly confusing, and I had no idea how to understand anything the show was telling me. I got kind of used to it on my second watch through, but I don't want to credit the show for making sense. I think I just was conditioned to the bad storytelling. Episodes 1 and 2 are kind of a doozy because of this, but it gets a little better. It gets bearable. So Fate the Winx Saga is just teeming with characters. It's an ensemble cast, just like the cartoon, which is, I would say it's a good thing, but because of the short runtime, we never get to see them meet their full potential. You have Bloom, a fire fairy, fish out of water, and overly emotional child who can't control her powers. As the main protagonist, Bloom's arc gets the most attention. She's new to Althea, she's new to fairies, she's new to magic, and she's trying to find out more about her origins. She has a bit of a complicated relationship with her parents, particularly her mother, which is handled as delicately as possible by the writers. I think Bloom likes thrifting, and she's a bit of a homebody, whereas her mom wants her to make friends and go outside. Also, there's just something so funny about these 20-something actresses just acting like teenagers. It's so cute. Either way, an ordinary family argument goes out of control when Bloom, who is unable to control her powers, accidentally burns her parents' bedrooms down. It's kind of traumatizing. They survive, don't worry. But Bloom, she's kind of racked with guilt over the whole thing, and she starts sleeping at night in this abandoned warehouse in order to avoid hurting them until Headmistress Farah finds her and invites her to come to Althea. That we're not shown for some reason, but we don't have time to show a lot of things now. While at the school, she finds out later that she was switched at birth by this woman named Rosalind.
When the time comes, find me.
Former mentor of Headmistress Farah and all the faculty running about, and Bloom becomes convinced that the faculty are trying to hide things from her, which will lead her to some stupid decisions. You have Aisha. She's a water fairy, the best character in the show and the only sensible one. Tara, an earth fairy who's a little insecure and a bit of an oversharer. Musa, a mind fairy and an empath. She hates awkward situations, which is funny because everyone keeps putting her in them. Stella, the princess of Solaria and a total bitch. She's on a journey, but it's a really annoying one to watch. Sky, a specialist at the Warrior Academy next door. He's the son of a war hero or something, but like the most important thing is he has super fluffy hair. Riven, another specialist and resident stoner. Apparently he used to be a nerd, but now he's a bad boy. You can tell he's a bad boy because he has a vape pen. Beatrix. Beatrix. She's the main villain. Dane, another specialist. He seems to be here entirely for the purposes of queerbaiting. He makes Tara sad and then he simps after one of the villains against his better judgment. He's the only character I think that isn't from the cartoon and he doesn't have much to show for it. And then there's like 3 or so adults whose job is to just wander around suspiciously and keep the secrets.
My thoughts exactly.
I like these arcs individually, but when the narrative is so short, you kind of wish that they would prioritize. Fate the Winx Saga manages to elevate major and minor dramas to the same level, to the point of absurdity. It devotes tons of time to each narrative arc regardless of their importance. Bloom being switched at birth, Tara being insecure, Stella being trapped in the shadow of her mother. It's all the same. These get roughly the same amount of screen time. Sometimes it's hard to take things seriously when things of roughly different stakes just whiz by you. Spread out over a longer series, this might work, but as it is, it feels like the show is trying to cram the maximum amount of conflict into so many scenes. Because the cast is so large and the runtime is so short, a lot of these character relationships are bundled together. The narrative usually focuses on groups of 2, usually each roommate pair, and there's good and bad to this. The good, you get better insight into kind of each individual dynamic between like the girl and her roommate, a lot better than you could if it were just mishmashed around. Bloom and Aisha, Tara and Musa, Stella and her bad attitude, Stella and Sky. The bad, they never have a group dynamic until the end, which is really disappointing. It's easy for me to describe the relationship between each pair and kind of what their dynamics are like, but these kind of feel like shortcuts to them actually being friends. For example, I can tell you that Bloom and Aisha butt heads a lot because she's extremely volatile and Aisha thinks before she does things. I can tell you that Tara overshares and Musa hates all emotions she can't deal with. I can tell you that Stella is just straight up toxic to her boyfriend Sky and it's honestly hard to watch. And I can tell you that Sky has a crush on Bloom. But I can't tell you what people feel about the others outside of these dynamics. I couldn't exactly tell you how Musa felt towards Bloom or Aisha felt towards Tara. I don't know how these characters feel about each other outside of their respective pairs. So instead of interlocking all the character relationships together or creating a group dynamic, Winx Club opts to bundle their character relationships in 2. It's a choice. It's not the most effective one, but it's probably one made out of necessity. Let's start with the better of these. Bloom and Aisha. They're good foils for each other. Bloom being over-emotional and brash, and Aisha being cautious to a fault. Her determination to figure out what happened to her birth family leads her to some stupid places. She ignores all the warning signs. And to be honest, she's responsible for every bad thing that happens over the course of the series. Aisha, however, just doesn't get a character arc, other than just disapproving of whatever stupid decision Bloom makes. And sometimes she's blamed for doing the right thing, which is just unacceptable. Moving on, there's Tara and Musa. Tara is a chronic oversharer, and Musa, who's an empath, keeps her distance from people whose emotions she doesn't like. This results in some low-level roommate drama, the stakes of which don't matter as much in comparison. You have Bloom and Aisha running around trying to figure out who Bloom's parents are, and then you have Musa in the corner.
Getting a really strong and sudden read of social anxiety.
Musa? There you are.
Afraid to tell Tara that she's dating her brother. Musa tells Tara that her mother died and she had to feel her pain the entire time, and her opening up helps to bring this arc to a bit of a conclusion. Meanwhile, Tara, who's an absolute delight, seems to be dealing with some insecurities that the writers don't really handle well. A lot of it kind of revolves over her being fat, and it just doesn't.
What about your girlfriend? You know, weird-ass fat girl loves plants, brownies.
It's just kind of characters bullying her for being fat, and I didn't particularly like how they went about it. Stella and Sky are placed together for most of the show, with Stella being outright offended that her ex-boyfriend is trying to move on, and Sky just trying to be a good friend. It's emotionally abusive in a way that was kind of hard for me to watch. But thankfully, it's a dynamic that's stopped by the time the series stops. Stella learns that her mother is actually abusive and tries to run away. She sort of learns how to be a better person, which I liked. The downside, her awful behavior is what keeps her away from the rest of the main cast, and by the end, it's just hard for me to buy that they're actually friends. Like, I can see the rest of the Winx Club being friends, but just not with her. Some of these mini arcs get a conclusion. Musa opens up to Tara about her mother's death. Stella runs away from her abusive mother and is actually helpful for the first time in her life. On the other hand, Aisha spends most of her time babysitting Bloom, and Tara's arc, which centers mostly around her being bullied, doesn't really go anywhere. By the time we get to the end, these girls are having a slumber party at Bloom's house, which just didn't completely feel natural. It was super cute, but I couldn't buy that these girls were friends. Outside of their little friendship duos, it's hard for me to say that these people have grown together. They just haven't. It's a very mean-spirited adaptation. Like, it takes so long for them just to like each other. Which is weird because the show is so much about how friendship is magic. Jesus. I keep coming back to this, but why would you have an ensemble cast and then just cram it into 6 episodes? I'm not angry, I'm just confused. Part 4. Drone strikes are okay as long as they're on evil witches and other plot contrivances. I'll explain the title in a second, I promise I'm coming back to it. I think the Winx Saga reminds me a lot of The Magicians. Why? Because both series are very interested in deconstructing the idea of a magical wizard boarding school. Not unlike the cartoon, Fate the Winx Saga comes clambering in with its classic Harry Potter style, kid goes to magic school vibe to it. Where the show finds its own fun is in deconstructing like the little building blocks of the genre. Oh, the professors at Althea seem caring and ready to help you develop your new powers? No, you can't trust them. What could they be hiding? The mindless monsters encroaching on the school? Where'd they come from? Why are they connected to Bloom? Is there a darker, hidden legacy that Althea's trying to hide? Unfortunately, the show just kinda hasn't decided on the answers to some of these questions. Or to put it charitably, they will be revealing them in season 2! Around episode 4, Beatrix reveals to Bloom that both of them originally came from this village called Asterdale that's right a few miles outside of Althea. They steal a car, head on over there, and discover that their professors killed an entire town of innocent people in order to kill the last of the burned ones. OMG, they brought back harmonic convergence. She tells Bloom that they were both rescued by Rosalind, who brought her to the human world. But Bloom becomes convinced that the faculty cannot be trusted. And it kind of affects all of the characters. Tara feels like she can't trust her dad, Sky feels like his mentor is lying to him. It's a cool thing that it happened. Bloom becomes convinced that she must free Rosalind, but over the next couple of episodes, we discover the truth. The professors that we thought might be hiding something, they were tricked into doing a war crime by their mentor. Apparently, they did all they could, which makes it awkward that Bloom is now responsible for releasing Rosalind and letting a bunch of burned ones in the school just massacre students. Episodes 4 and 5 did a good job at showing that Bloom couldn't trust the institutions around her. Episode 4 shows us a literal massacre conducted by the faculty. Yet, by the end, everything that the faculty did was justified, and there was an even greater evil lurking about, consisting of evil Commander Rosalind, Sky's literal father returned from the dead, and the Queen. Oh no! And then even after this, Rosalind claims that the destruction of Asterdale was justified because they were evil blood witches. They're like humans that were trying to get magic, so they stole 2 fairy babies to steal their magic, and they must die because they're evil witches. Evil witches. Apparently they had kidnapped Bloom and Beatrix as literal infants, and Bloom hears this and is like, that checks out.
The settlers of Asterdale weren't innocent. They were blood witches. And my birth parents weren't even there.
So you get this bizarro finale where Bloom is justifying drone strikes on witches because they're blood witches and not her parents, while at the same time her love interest is horrified at hearing that his dad massacred a village full of innocent people.
Flawed. He killed hundreds of people. And you killed him. And all I get from you is you're both flawed.
Two characters coming to completely different conclusions about the same event, which is uncomfortable because the narrative doesn't even confirm which interpretation is accurate. It's awfully confusing, and it gives me the impression that the writers haven't even decided on if genocide is bad. Let's be clear, they were blood witches doesn't justify an act of genocide, and honestly it just seems like an old school empire excuse for atrocities, like, oh, the Aztecs did human sacrifice, that was why it was okay for the conquistadors to do that. This also becomes even more confusing for the character of Beatrix. Beatrix tells Bloom that they were originally from Asterdale, but the plot reveals they weren't, they were just kidnapped babies from it, so now you have to ask yourself the question, was Beatrix lying to Bloom earlier? Was she trying to get her to distrust the faculty by making her think that they'd falsely died in the attack? Or was Beatrix even aware? Maybe she was also tricked by Rosalind and Sky's dead father into believing that her family died in the attack. I don't know. The next scene indicates that Beatrix might be lying just to mess with Bloom. It's not really clear to me.
I wonder if anyone will believe you. I doubt it.
That might be true, but it's not confirmed either way, and it's just really confusing to me. Austin Jones from Paste Magazine called this both sidism, and I kind of agree. It feels like the writers were trying to say that both sides were wrong in the conflict, and it's hard to watch. It's an oddly reductive way of exploring the social issues of their world. I feel like the writers wanted to complicate who were the bad guys and who were the good guys, but they did it in the clumsiest way possible, to the point where the main characters aren't even on the same page about literal genocide. Part of the problem might also be, again, the short runtime. There's not enough time for these big, world-changing reveals to sit in, so we're not shocked when they're immediately reversed. We haven't seen Headmistress Farah be a good person to Bloom. Like, we haven't seen her do much of anything, so it's not shocking to believe that she might be a bad person or did a war crime. This is immediately undone when Rosalind is revealed to be evil villain number 1, and that the witches of Asterdale deserved being massacred. Ooh. You can't subvert a status quo you didn't create. And because of that, watching Fate the Winx Saga feels less like watching a careful deconstruction of the magical boarding school genre, and it feels more like the writers are just wildly deviating between morally gray and morally gray with no end in sight. Here are a bunch of lingering questions I had because this series has been living rent-free in my head for 3 weeks. Who are the burned ones? Where did they come from? I know they would answer this one in a season 2, but I'm so confused. Episode 5, minute 7. That's when it happened.
He's still got like a hard-on for her. A weird, gay hard-on. Is he even gay?
And that's when I started to ask myself, am I being meta-queerbaited? And is meta-queerbaiting the new way of the future? Dane's presence in the show doesn't matter. All that matters is that he's awful to Tara, he's into Riven, and he's kind of into Beatrix, even after she's arrested for murder and kidnapping. Some of the characters in the show, mainly Riven, wonder if he's attracted to men, and it doesn't really matter, because the last word the show has to say on the subject is,
I think you're hot. She is too, in a different way.
Who do you think about when you're having a wank?
Fuck you.
I don't even need the show to label as sexuality, but it's just so strange that they just circle around it. His character has nothing more to it other than queerbaiting the audience and being a plot tool to help Beatrix. For no other reason other than she was good to me. In conclusion, it's too confusing to be homophobic. But it's also queerbaiting that seems to understand that it's queerbaiting. And for that I hate it. Why are they British? Seriously, everyone's British except for Bloom, who's from California, of course. Like, they're in another world. Why are they all British? Was this an accident? Just to make sure, this is another world, right? It's not just an Irish castle in our world. Bloom starts to act pretty dumb. refusing to wait literally 24 hours before releasing Beatrix, releasing Rosalind, and she literally causes every problem over the last 2 episodes. It's hard to take her seriously as a protagonist, especially when she's responsible for the entire school being under attack.
To feel drained for a day or two.
I've been a brat.
The characters blame Aisha for telling the faculty that Bloom was planning on releasing a powerful war criminal, despite the fact that Bloom's plan went horribly wrong anyways. Like, she's not a teacher's pet. You guys are just all wrong. Rosalind says, yes, I did do airstrikes on unarmed civilians, but they were blood witches, so it was fine. And Bloom is completely on board with this and never says anything about it being wrong ever again. There's something very militaristic about the fairies and the specialists of this universe that made me a little sad. They phased out the wings, the costumes are just kind of grittier. I get the impression that the writers didn't think we'd take the campier parts of Winx Club seriously, which is a shame because I would have done it. The saddest part is that it doesn't seem willing to explore the new things it creates. There are boy fairies, which didn't exist in the cartoon, but the magic they do never feels magical. At most there's a boy that walks through walls and an herbalist. It's very grounded magic. There's remarkably little original world building done here. Characters smoke weed, they scroll through each other's Instagram stories, they play beer pong. It's supposed to be another world, but it just feels like our world, but with magic. Seriously, you're in a magical universe and you're smoking with a vape pen and eating pot brownies. Is there not something more magical to do? I wish they'd go to class more. I wanted to learn more about their lessons or how magic works, but the best I got was magic is linked to emotions. That's why you calm the fuck down. The indie pop soundtrack was nice, but it was a little on the nose at times.
We're a product of a system in the world that never listens to the messed up truth. I didn't know at the time that as long as I float, I'll be fine.
Seriously, imagine bringing home a bunch of your friends for the holidays without giving your parents at least 3 business days in advance to prepare. Couldn't be me. Part 6. I didn't hate the finale. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't great. I feel like I could have created this shot at home with a green screen. What are these musical choices? But it came together towards the end. I felt like the girls were becoming friends, and they all went to Bloom's house, and it was super cute. Then the girls march back to magical boarding school, and there are all these wicked reveals. The headmistress has been murdered. Sky's father is back from the dead, and he's Beatrix's father. Rosalind is in charge. It was wild. Even though I struggled to get through the first few episodes, I wanted to see what would happen next. Here's my too long didn't watch opinion. On the sliding scale of CW trash, I'd say this was worse than Riverdale Season 1, but better than Riverdale Season 3. It wasn't unbearable, but it was baffling at times. 1 and 2 are a doozy, but it starts to get interesting in the second half. Obviously that doesn't redeem the series, but I'm interested in what happens next. I also think the writers intentionally designed it like this to make a sequel kind of inevitable. It's short and it ends on a super big cliffhanger. It's bad, but I want a season 2. It's bad, but I want a season 2. I'm part of the problem. So in conclusion, I mean, I'd watch a season 2. I've given up on having good taste, really. It's not great, but honestly, it's too short and strange to criticize. Thank you for making it to the end of this video! If you like this video, please like and subscribe. How'd you feel about the live action Winx? Do you miss the cartoon like me? Were there any lingering questions you had? Feel free to comment down below. Okay, bye!